And we're back on Mountain West Men's Basketball Media Days, powered by Air Force Reserve. I'm Jesse Kurtz in the Mountain West Network studio in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's time now to head to Reno, Nevada, and the head coach of the Wolfpack, Steve Alford, joining us from the University of Nevada. Coach Alford, great to see you. How's life out in Reno right now?
Thanks a lot. A little cold than what we normally get right now, but we're starting to get some snow on the Sierras, so it's obviously a very beautiful part of the country, so we're enjoying it right now.
Well, we're glad that we're getting close to seeing you guys back out on the basketball floor again. Second season at Nevada. You've been around college basketball a long time. You've coached at a number of different stops. How different and challenging has this been for you, given the time that we're in, and you have been around and seen so much and have overcome so much in your career?
Yeah, we've talked about that as coaches, kind of my age, mid-50s, and been in it a while, both as a player and as a coach, that I think you get to this part of your career, you think you've seen it all. Yet there's another curveball in life, and having a pandemic to deal with, and trying to help young people understand that. You've got freshmen that normally are leaving the home for the first time, and you come and you're checking into a dorm or you're checking into an apartment, and now you're just left there with a team. And now this year that happens differently, to where you're basically going into quarantine, and that's hard. So just dealing with a lot of the things that the young people have to deal with when they leave home, I think that's been accelerated with what's happened with the pandemic. And hopefully we've done a good job with it. I think our guys are in a good state and a good frame of mind right now. But I am sensitive to the fact that being a former player, this has been as much of a challenging time for young people and young student athletes as any time that I can ever remember. It's a very challenging time for them.
No question about it. If you have a question for Coach Alford, please raise your hand. You'll be allowed a question and then a follow-up question. If you have a follow-up question, just leave your hand up. If you don't, you can go ahead and take that down. Our first question for you, Coach Alford, comes from Albuquerque, the Albuquerque Journal's Jeff Grammer.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Very good, Jeff. How are you?
Pretty good. I know everybody's well aware of what you guys lost from last year's roster. A lot of really good guards, obviously. But well, first of all, I wanted to ask you about the coaching position you lost. It's a 5-0 Corey Alford now, and the best win percentage in the Alford family among coaches. I know he's off to a good start, and he's actually getting to coach some games. How has that been to watch Corey coaching?
Oh, it's been tremendous. And I was trying to get back for a doubleheader last weekend, but just because of the state of the country with COVID and me being 2 weeks away from starting, it wasn't probably very smart to go. So I decided not to go, but being able to watch all the games on stream, and they've been great. And I knew he was going to be analytically driven, and his team shot 43s last night on the road, made 18, and only turned the ball over 3 times. So it's like, I think it's one of those things, hey, I told you, Dad, just get a bunch of threes up. But he's at a great school, Jeff. Huntington University is a strong Christian institution, great leadership. Tanya and I couldn't be more pleased at where he's getting his start.
Well, I know after that first game, I asked Bryce what he thought about it, and he said they made a lot of threes and missed a lot of layups, looked just like Corey to me. So,
there's probably a lot of truth to that. Corey would pass up a layup to dribble out to shoot a 3.
So I do want to ask you, you talked about this weird time. I mean, you've been in this 30 years now, and you're only in your 50s. And you talked about what this means to players, and you're trying to be sensitive to all this as a player. But what are you doing as a coach to kind of change? You've coached long enough where you probably have a pretty good routine on what you're doing 2 weeks out of a season and what you're doing a month out. What are you doing to change, and how's that affecting, your approach?
Well, it's a great question, because, Coach Neal and I have been doing it a long time, and we like how our blueprint looks. And your blueprint, no matter how you like your blueprint, gets disrupted this way. So it's not just your normal game plan anymore of how you go about day-to-day business. And one of the things I think we do well in our program is how we communicate to our players, how much we're around our players. And because of a pandemic, you got to be sensitive to that. You can't have the team gatherings. You can't, we weren't able to take a players retreat this year. We've always taken a players retreat, not able to take a coaches retreat. We've always done things like that just to build our culture. And so now we just had to do a lot more things in-house. You're doing it at practice now. You're doing it at workouts now. You're around the guys as much as possible. Most summers I'm here and I'm around the guys. but it's just at the workouts. Now you're trying to be around them as much as you can, Jeff, because they don't even get to go to class with their peers. Everything's online. So it's very, very different for these young people than any other class or any other season we've had to deal with.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next question for you, Coach Alford, comes from Davis Potter from the Casper Star Tribune.
Hey, Steve.
Hello.
Wyoming hired a new coach in Jeff Linder, who was actually on Leon Rice's staff at Boise State a few years ago. But as somebody that's been around the Mountain West a while, I'm curious what you think of that hire and how much different they might look just from a systematic standpoint under Jeff.
Yeah, it's hard to understand, or try to predict how the team's going to look or change. I know they got some good pieces because of the teams we played last year. Wyoming, it was hard at Wyoming, it was hard here, and it was hard in the tournament. So I like their pieces. I like some of the talent that is on that team. And, I guess, my advice, because we've already had a head coach's call, and he said, I'm with Leon. I'm like, you can't say that. You can't say you're with Leon. You might say you're voting along the lines of Boise, but don't say you're with Leon. But I like to give Leon, a headache every now and then. But he's obviously from a great program. I have a lot of respect for Leon and his program, and I think he's going to do tremendous. I think it's a very good hire by Wyoming.
Next question for Chris Murray, Nevada Sports Network.
Just curious what your thoughts were on the new Mountain West conference format with the 20 games and kind of the home series with two out of 3 games being played there.
Yeah, I want to give credit to our coaches in our league and the Mountain West Conference. I think both the administrators of our league, our athletic directors, our presidents, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to our league coaches to getting ahead of this. And we're not saying it's going to be the right thing to do, but I do think when you look at it, I mean, you got Miami and Stetson. They just canceled their opening game, and that's 2 weeks away. In the state that we're in, I think we've been proactive in trying to figure out what's the best case to where our student athletes are going to get to play games. It's not going to be equitable. This is not going to be a year where, hey, I can't complain if I got to go play 2 games here and they don't have to play 2 games here or 1 game here. It's not going to be an equitable year. We're not in a normal year. But I really give the coaches of this league, we've been on several calls. I give them credit that they're thinking not about self, not about career, not about even what's going to happen from NCAA bids or any of those things. How can our players get on the court and play games? That's what they want to do. And how can we do that in the safest environment? And I do think, Chris, I think the format that we've come up with, the bubble format just doesn't work. I don't think that works at the collegiate level from a financial standpoint. When you're looking at officials at our level have other jobs. So putting them in a bubble for 3 to 4 weeks, it just doesn't work. They've got other jobs that they've got to get to. It's not their sole income that they're doing. And so I think doing the games where we're going to play 2 games in one site, maybe a Friday, Sunday, come home and you're going to play a Thursday, Saturday or whatever, where you're playing 3 games in 2 days with only traveling 5 times. And some of those travel could possibly be by bus. I think that's very beneficial of trying to put together a format where our student athletes have the best chance of playing games.
Also wanted to ask about your freshmen. I know you're very high on all of them. Is there one in particular or 2 in particular that you think might be able to make the biggest impact this year, either just because they're more advanced or because of a need at that specific position with your roster?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. And if you ask me that today, it'll change tomorrow. It'll change on Friday, and it's because they're freshmen. But I have been very impressed with them, and I think you're going to see all the freshmen on our roster get a chance to make a difference because we got some depth right now. It's just young depth. We have very little experience. We've got really only one starter coming back, and that's in Robbie Robinson, who started most of the games last year. We don't have a lot of scoring coming back. We've got a lot of question marks, a couple really good players that are sitting out that now get to play, but they haven't played in over a year. So those freshmen are going to get a chance to play, and all of them have done a really good job to start the season. I like how hard they work, and I like how they just want to get better, and they watch film, they listen, they understand things. They've just got to go through some experiences. Maybe it helps being in a pandemic and playing some young players where you go on the road and there's not going to be a lot of fans. Maybe that's a positive. We're trying to find a positive out of the situation, but we've just got to get experience with these young players. But I do like the makeup of our team. It's just going to take a while.
Thank you, Chris. Next question from John Mallory, KTIK 93.1 The Ticket.
Yeah, Coach. Just wanted to talk about your experience in this league before, having won the conference regular season championship 4 times there in Albuquerque. Now, what have you noticed maybe from afar or at a closer glance about where this league is now compared to where it was last time you were here?
Yeah, it's hard because just the landscape has changed. When I was my first job, my first year at New Mexico, you're looking at BYU, Utah, TCU, what was in the league at the time. My current employment Nevada wasn't even in the Mountain West at that time. So I only played, Nevada came in my last year of the Mountain West play. So the landscape has changed. The leadership within the conference, Craig Thompson is still our leader. He's been doing a tremendous job, and I like what we're doing as far as the league. We got 11 teams now instead of 10. So I think that presents some obstacles in equity of schedule and playing everybody twice. That becomes a difficult thing. I think that's why a lot of coaches are, trying to go back and forth of 18 to 20 games and being able to play everybody twice potentially, or staying with 18 to allow for better non-conference games of those of us that can schedule better non-conference games to help us with NCAA at large bids. So there's a very fine line that I think we're at with our league right now that we got to do a good job of marketing our league. And then, it's like every other league. You got to win, and you got to win non-league games. And when we were in New Mexico, we won a lot of key non-league games that really helped us going into league play. Had we not won the league, or had we not won the league tournament, we had set ourselves up to be in consideration. And I think that's what all of us are striving to do. It's gotten a lot harder now that you're in a pandemic, and now travel is almost impossible. Budgets have been reduced across the country. So you're not going to see a lot of that this year, I think, to where you're going to get a lot of non-conference games that have that merit of building your resume. And we've just got to understand that and make sure, first and foremost, the health of our team, our players, our coaches, our administration that travels, and then giving our student athletes as much opportunities to play as we can, because we didn't get that at the end of last year.
Coach, you probably know more about the advantages of home court than just about anybody in this league, going back to Assembly Hall, the Pit, Pauley. You've seen the momentum shift in games when that crowd gets behind you. You've probably won games you had no business winning, but you had that home crowd behind you.
Yeah.
If that's not the case this year, and it sounds maybe more of like an open gym type of flavor, how do you think that's going to be, Coach Alford, when you take the home court advantage with the crowds out of college basketball? Because it's such a big part of the fabric of what college hoops is, Coach Alford.
Yeah, and I think, coaches usually get an exhibition game, 2 exhibition games, or a scrimmage to where you get young players or inexperienced guys or guys that had to sit out last year, kind of our team to a T. They get that experience. Some of them, I've had teams before where they just run. We tell somebody to sub and they don't go check in. They just run in like it's an AAU game. And it's because they're nervous. It's their first experience. We don't get that this year. We're going to tip it on the 25th, and that's the first time. So you're probably going to see some interesting games on TV in late November here to start the season, just because of experiences. And then I think coaches, we've always tried to generate enthusiasm in practice and noise and getting used to that. And now it's almost the flip. Now you're trying to practice in a 10,000 seated arena and make it as quiet as you possibly can, because that's really what it looks like we're going to be playing in most of the season. So odd times, different times, but I hope that we can still, in college basketball, as administrators, coaches, make this as an enjoyable process for our student athletes, because it's still all about them. And hopefully we are able to stay healthy as an organization and get as many games in as we can and get into what should be a great national tournament in March.
Thank you, John. Up next from the San Diego Union Tribune, Mark Ziegler.
Coach, Brian Dutcher has agreed with what you've said about, this is the best thing we've got to do for the health and safety of our players and getting in the most games with this schedule. But he's also, one area that he's been a little critical is the altitude for sea-level teams, particularly the second game in altitude is a big effect. What are your thoughts on that? You've always coached in altitude.
Well, that's a pandemic hasn't caused Dutch to talk about altitude. He's been talking about altitude since he's been at San Diego State, and their record at San Diego State's not too bad. Whether I've been at New Mexico for the 6 years I was at New Mexico and now one at Nevada, I know my 7 years in this league. They do all right, whether it's sea level or whether it's climbing a mountain, they do pretty well. But, I obviously understand what Dutch is talking about, but it also is we're the Mountain West Conference. So it's not, we've got half of our league is at altitude. We're at altitude, so the pit when I was in New Mexico was altitude. So, you've got half that are at altitude and half that aren't. And so it's just part of our league. And I think in this particular season, and I think Dutch understands that, you're probably going to have to go play 2 games at altitude that normally you'd only play once. But, instead of playing at Colorado State and then playing at Wyoming, maybe you got to play 2 games at Colorado State. That's what we're looking at right now. Or I've got to play 2 games at Fresno instead of playing 1 game at Fresno and 1 game at San Jose, both that you wouldn't say are more sea level than what we are. So it's a little different. That is going to be different. I'm not saying it's equitable, but again, to try to just safe keep as much as we can for the student athletes and getting as many games as we can. I think Dutch understands that. I understand that. May not be totally equitable or what we all want, but we're not going to get that in this kind of year. And I appreciate the coaches and I appreciate the administrators in our league office really taking the forefront and not waiting. We could be sitting here and waiting on the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or looking at other leagues that are neighboring us. And we didn't do that. We got out on the forefront, and I think we did the best thing we could to try to ensure we're going to play as many league games as we can.
I think his point is that there maybe should be some oversight from the league. Not if the computer comes up and says you got to play all 5 of your road trips are in altitude for a sea-level team, that should be adjusted. Do you agree with that? The league should step in and try to make at least that part equitable and not send them 5 times altitude.
So there's a chance. So if I called Craig, there's a chance that San Diego State would have to play all 10 of their road games in altitude.
Yeah.
Ooh, I might have to make that call when I'm done from here. That sounds like a good idea. No, and I'm joking, but no, I don't think Dutch is going to have to, or nor anybody else is probably going to have to play all their road games at altitude or sea level. I think the conference is going to do everything they can to make it as equitable as it can, but it's not going to be a perfect world this year. But no, I would be shocked if that's the way it comes out. And shoot, if Dutch has to play 10 games in altitude, the least I will either give him a comforting phone call or send him a really nice letter that I'm just sorry how things turned out.
Our next question, thank you, Mark, is from Andrew Nepson from KTVN in Reno.
Hey, Coach, with the weirdness of this upcoming season, what kind of mindset do your guys need to have going into this, and how does it compare to past years and how players need to approach a season?
Yeah, I think you look at our league, we got some teams that have some experience. They've got guys that have been through the league. And so, or you're a team like us that we really haven't got a lot of those guys. We've got maybe a handful of guys that have even been to all the league schools here in our conference. You got a vast majority of your team haven't done that. So when you've got teams like that, it's like just trying to explain to them what it's like to play at San Diego State or Colorado State or Boise or the Pit. You're just trying to explain that to them. And now you're trying to explain to them, it doesn't matter where we're going to be playing. It's empty. So now it's like we're practicing in Lawler as much as we can instead of the practice facility just to get some experience of practicing in an empty, large arena. So it's a little bit different that way, but it's the same issues. When you've got a young, inexperienced team, you probably as a coach you worry about a lot more things than you do when you've got an experienced team and you've got an older team. And we just don't have that. So it's a great question. I just don't know as we get into the plane of games, what's going to come up with my team that we have to address and try to help them with.
Then one of those guys coming over, Desmond Cambridge, what do you feel he specifically brings to this team and what he can really add?
Yeah, Dez is huge for us because obviously we lost a lot of good guards, and JC was a grad transfer, so we lost our starting center as well. So we lost a lot of scoring, and our guards were a big punch last year. And then Jalen leaves for the NBA draft, and we're hopeful that draft here in the coming weeks go very well for Jalen. But Jalen could really score. He's a Mountain West Conference leading returning scorer, and with him leaving, Desmond can really fill that hole because he can really score the ball. He scored over 1,000 points in the Ivy League in 2 seasons. He's had a great year sitting out. I think what he brings to us, he brings somebody not only can score, but he's got great athleticism and he's a really good defender. Very, very active, long defender in our backcourt that we're really trying to build towards, and he can lay a really good foundation for us there this year.
Thank you, Andrew. We now go to Curtis Terry from UNLV Radio.
Coach, hope all is well for you guys up in Reno. Obviously, it's been mentioned that
Likewise.
you guys lost on the radio broadcast. I dubbed your trio, the law firm, Harris, Johnson, and Drew. I mean, they averaged 49 points a game. We know you're unsure what you're going to get on the court with a young team. Jelani Clark has an ability to come in and lead your group. But going through the pandemic, losing that leadership, what kind of impact has that had on your guys? And if so, what kind of impact has that had? But then who have been the players that have stepped up and kind of taken over that leadership role with losing that trio and your starting center?
Yeah, I think from a leadership standpoint, getting our captains, Grant Sherfield, Desmond Cambridge, KJ Himes, putting some ownership on them, and they're young. So you got the young captain group that is learning how to lead as well. So spending a lot of time with them on just how to lead, what leadership looks like, what entails the responsibility that goes into that. But we don't have a lot of experience on our team. I think from June to this point, the guys have done a tremendous job of learning, growing, doing the things that we've asked them to do, being diligent off the court, doing the things academically, all the things they've been great. Now the difference is going to be, we're going to start playing games here in about 12 days. How does that change? And the things that are thrown at you in game. The out of game stuff, I think they've handled really well. What I mean by out of game practices, all the things that happen off the court, but it takes on a whole different level when you're in game and coaches can't call timeouts every 2 minutes. You have to have the flow of the game go, and who can lead, who can say, okay, it's a 6-0 run. Let's get a stop and let's work for a layup. Whatever that may be, those are things we're just going to have to experience here early in the season and try to get better at.
Definitely, Coach. And from my experience of playing against you when you were at New Mexico, I hope these young guys are prepared to play through some of those learning curves and learning mistakes, as I know you're a very aggressive, passionate coach. Good luck this year, Coach.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Curtis. And thank you, Coach Alford. Appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you.
Be well, be healthy, and we look forward to seeing you on the basketball floor real soon.
Thanks so much, Jesse. Appreciate it.
You bet. That's head coach Steve Alford of the Nevada Wolfpack. Of course, the Wolfpack returning one starter, that being Robbie Robinson, but they are returning Desmond Cambridge Jr., a junior from Nashville, Tennessee. He is on deck from Reno. We will be joined by him here just shortly. In fact, I am told that we are now joined by Desmond Cambridge Jr. So let's head to Reno, Nevada, the campus of the University of Nevada, and bring in the junior guard from Nashville, Tennessee. Desmond, I appreciate you joining us. You've had a year to sit out to practice with this team. What should we expect from the Wolfpack? Coach Alford said it's going to be a very young, very inexperienced team, but you have seen what you have. What will we see?
First of all, I appreciate you having me, but you should expect a very energized, very, very sound team. We've been working all summer, with the COVID, with the corona going on, and so that's gave us minor setbacks. But the team is just young, experienced. Everyone's ready to learn. Everyone's a family, and we all together. And so we're going to be really excited to watch.
If you have a question for Desmond, raise your hand. We'll get you in queue. Our first question for you comes from San Diego and the San Diego Union Tribune and Mark Ziegler. Mark?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only Mountain West team that you've played against is San Diego State. And I'm wondering if you can just maybe, what do you remember about that game at Viejas Arena? You had a big game. Your team had a really big game. You won big. But what are some of your memories of that game?
Man, that's probably my favorite game to this day. The arena is amazing. That's the most fans I think I've ever played against. But I had a really good game, and everyone was just clicking. And so that was my first time out to the West Coast in California. And so it was really, really like a dream come true. I love that game, and we beat them pretty good. And so that was a pretty good trip.
When you decided to transfer, was San Diego State a consideration at all when you decided you were going to come west?
No, not at all. It was just about them.
And thank you. Next up will be John Teetle from Hoops HD.
Hi, Desmond. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to know, there was talk about the schedule this year and how it would be a lot of like go to some place, play 2 games, and then come back. I assume you have more experience than anybody in the conference because at Brown you played a lot of Friday and Saturday night back-to-backs. From your experience, is there a big secret, or what is the biggest factor? Is it about not getting exhausted and recovering, or not having a lot of time to scout the second opponent, or how did it work out for you?
To be honest, I mean, you just go into the mindset of you just playing the game to win. And so you do give your all in that first game because, you're still trying to win that game. But, at Brown, we would scout the other team maybe the Thursday before the Friday game and then right after the game that night after. But, it gets pretty intense, just the back-to-back games. But your body kind of gets used to it. And so it's definitely doable. But in this situation, since we're playing 2 teams back-to-back and then the same team over and over again, I think that kind of poses a different situation because you're trying to beat the same team twice, and that can be hard to do.
Thank you, John. Our next question comes from Nevada Sportsnet's Chris Murray.
Desmond, you obviously got to practice with the Wolfpack last year. You went against 4 guards who all got all Mountain West honors. Jalen Harris might be drafted next week. What was the biggest thing you learned from going against them, and where are you more improved heading into this season than the last time you got to play on the court?
So those guards, Lindsey, Jalen, Jazz, Niz, they taught me so much because they were so much more experienced. They had been here with Coach Musselman here, and they were just so experienced. And the biggest thing they probably told me was just to, slow down your game, play at 65%. And that I think that's helped me improve my decision-making, shot selection, like everything, because you just see the game more slowly and you see the game for what it is, and it makes it so much more easier.
Obviously, losing all those guys, Nevada loses 80% of its scoring from last year. What do you feel like your role has to be on this team this year for you guys not to take a step back in terms of helping pick up some of that load scoring-wise?
I mean, I definitely have to score, but at the end of the day, I trust my team. All of us have been working hard just to implement our offenses, teach the new guys what we're trying to do. And then our big within Warren, KJ, they're going to be really we'll be able to throw the ball in more, and it will be a more all-around offense. And we even though we're not guard-oriented like we were last year, we still put up a lot of points. And, yeah.
Thank you, Chris. We'll stay in Reno for our next question. Andrew Nepson from KTVN.
Hey, Desmond. When you look at this weird year as you're about to approach and dive right into it, from a player's perspective, what kind of mindset do you think you feel you need to have for this strange, unique season coming up?
Man, that's such a hard question because I feel like we're all trying to figure that out as we go. But at the end of the day, we have to bring our own energy because most venues we're not going to have any fans. and it's just going to be the teams and maybe a small group of family members. So, you know, being able to get yourself going and, you know, not having the fans there to support you, that can be really hard. And the best energy teams or who can come, the teams that can create their own energy will be the ones that have an edge in these type of games.
And last year during these media days, when we talked to the Nevada guys, they really felt they were picked in the middle of the pack, that they were being slept on. Do you feel the same way being picked 6? How do you feel you can compete within this Mountain West Conference with what you see around you with this team?
You know, I just heard about that today. And so, you know, you just take everything with a grain of salt, man. You know, we can't control what will be picked in the ranks, but we can control what we do every day, coming in, getting better, and just focusing on what we do. Because with what we do every day, and if we do what we're supposed to do, by the end of the season, we'll be where we need to be. And yeah, so it's that time. Time will tell, and it's that time.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your questions here today for the Nevada Wolfpack. Thank you, Desmond, for your time and your insights. We wish you well in staying healthy and getting on the court, and good luck this season to you and the Wolfpack.
I thank you. Appreciate you having me.